Google just announced they are ditching PRDs and focusing on a building-first culture. On the other hand, a startup called Lovable is claiming they've completely eliminated PMs and just vibe code everything. The funny thing is that this split the PM community. While some people are saying that this is the future, others are saying that it's a recipe for disaster. And so, who's right? And most importantly, what does that mean for you and for your career as a PM? Let me read you what's actually being said. This Google PM tweets, "We're moving from a writing-first culture to a building-first one. Writing was a proxy for clear thinking, optimized for scarce engineering resources and long dev cycles. Now, when time to vibe code prototype is approximately the same to time to write PRDs, PMs can show, not tell." And here's the lovable response that got everyone talking. "We shortcut entire PM lifecycle. No PM organization. Engineers do all of the PMing." Oh, wow. "We don't do PRDs, we just build. And if we get it wrong, we fix it. The cost of a mistake is less than the cost of delay." Sounds revolutionary, right? But before you throw away your PRD templates, let me show you what the PM community is saying about this. Here's a comment that perfectly captures the skepticism. "Jumping right into vibe coding is cool, but you narrow your solution space almost immediately. It's still worth the upfront thinking to define the problem, explore different solutions, and then ship something." And this one hits even harder. "It works until it doesn't, but pretty much every software startup works like that. It's not some breakthrough or particularly unusual." Here's what these experienced PMs understand that these vibe coding evangelists are missing. Context matters. On the one hand, you have a company like Google with infinite resources to rebuild features. That is robust. Nothing happens if you screw up something small. You have a huge company. And on the other hand, you have a startup where the founders have most probably spent months, or I don't know how long, thinking about the problem. And they just needed to build. The thing is, a startup working without product is not an exception, that's the rule. It's not about vibe coding, it's about companies knowing exactly what their problem that they're trying to solve is. The problems come afterwards. What happens with most startups I'm actually asked to jump into is they've tried this thing of management and engineering working together and engineering working directly with stakeholders, and at some point that is a setup that doesn't really work. Engineering listens literally to everything that stakeholders ask from them, and then stakeholders aren't happy because stakeholders weren't thinking about the friction that this can cause to the user or how usability should be like. They are not thinking about an edge case. That's why they're struggling. There is another case, for example, where PMs are then asked to jump in with a sense of urgency. They say, "Help us figure out what's going on. Why are numbers not growing? Why are we not achieving this?" Or, "Hey, we need to secure a next financing round, and this will only happen if we reach this amount of users. But even though we are putting marketing dollars out there, it's like throwing money into the fire. Nothing is happening. There is no traction." That's when they call product. It's not that they don't understand what it is that they are building at the beginning. Everyone knows what they are building at the beginning, or they have a clue of what they're building at the beginning. There are also situations where engineering has been dictating what's being built, and at some point, the founders don't understand what's going on. Why are we using this and not that? And when they cannot get answers, rather than spending their time on trying to understand engineering, they go and get a product manager to bring in some clarity. That's something that happened to me in the past. It is super optimistic to think, oh, we just vibe code everything and it's wonderful. Look, the startups I work with in the past, when they are trying to scale, they have a thing called architecture. They have a thing called dependencies. It's not like you're gonna build a whole new service, a whole new checkout, just because there is a part of your new feature that affects checkout. Like, that's not how it works. Another version of spaghetti, but in this case, that will be spaghetti code. On the one hand, you have Google, who just did this whole buyout thing. They said, hey, you're either in or you're out, your choice. But this is the new direction. And the new direction is AI. And then on the other hand, you have the startup Lovable preaching that vibe coding is everything, and they are offering a vibe coding solution. The problem with this is that then you have founders reading those posts and all of those comments and people adding on top. Those founders read those things and then they go to you, the product manager, and say, hey, I read this post, I want us to do the same. Let's vibe code everything. And in that moment, you feel your heart beating really fast. Should I wait for another PM to raise this? Should I just look for a new job? Because they are not thinking about the context. And then those founders go to you and say, hey, let's do vibe coding. Many founders, the smart ones, they will listen to you. Like I work with really, really good founders who just tell me, what should we do? What do you think? They don't tell me what to do. They know that it is better to leave the decisions to the people doing product. But that's not always the case. Another thing to consider with this context, when it comes to both Google and Lovable, they have senior engineers. And you know what happens with senior engineers? They've already worked with product. They know product thinking. They know what used to go inside those PRDs. They've read those tickets. They already build planning with those things. But what do you do when you have younger engineers? Most of us aren't working either at Google or at Lovable. We are not working with unlimited resources, and we are not working in a context where the problem validation is already figured out. We are there to shut down the fire that is going on in there. Number one, you're confusing delivering features with delivering value. Being fast at delivering features doesn't mean that you're actually delivering any value to the user. It just means that you're shipping things fast. Whether you're solving the real problem or not, that's something you'll figure out afterwards. Being able to write a prompt and getting code fast to see something already built doesn't mean that you're building something that is worth it for the user. It just means that you're building something. There are some companies that just want to build and they want to build quick, and they end up building, 2-3 times more features than any other companies. But then when it comes to results, they have problems with adoption, they have problems with retention, they have problems with getting users. And then you have the traditional PM style companies, which are perhaps not shipping that often, but when they do, they create that value. They move that business metric. Why is that? Because they are building the right things. They are not just building things right and fast. The vibe coding approach optimizes for shipping features, whilst the traditional PM approach optimizes for shipping value. Number two, you're training your team to stop thinking. This is something that most people are not realizing. This is not a problem that only affects companies that are doing vibe coding. It also affects people who are using LLMs. When you outsource this whole decision process or thinking process, you're training your brain not to think. The moment that smartphones came into play, many people started reporting problems with memory, and they were going to neurologists. And neurologists were just saying, hey, your brain consumes 25% of the body energy. And something similar is going to happen with this vibe coding or LLM usage at some point. When people are outsourcing all of this decision making to the LLMs, they're kind of training themselves to be a little bit dumber. You're teaching your brain not to think, and think requires so much energy. So you're just telling your brain, hey, you can store that energy because I have another resource. You've been training your brain to take shortcuts. The way coding is taught is to start building things. But when I was learning to code, I had a friend who was in tech since forever, who was asking me, please think about what you're doing. Stop just trying to code something. Think about what you want to do. Think about the problem you're trying to solve. Think about your payload. What are you going to need now? What are you going to need later? And with this vibe coding approach, I feel like you're telling everyone, hey, stop thinking. Let's just code whatever comes to mind. Here's the scary part. When you do hit a problem where you cannot code around it, who in your team is going to solve it?
That's right.
Okay, number three. This is the most important part. It was the whole reason why I did this video. You're killing your team's motivation. Imagine asking your team to build things all the time and the management saying, I don't like this. Hey, no, I don't want that. And that happening on a recurring basis. You know what happens after that? You lose your passion. You lose your motivation to do something. There is research that's backing this up. I don't know if you know Dan Ariely. He's a behavioral economist. Actually, he wrote this book. This is one of my favorite books when it comes to information about product. Damn, it's dusty. Then Ariely and probably his team did an experiment when they had people split in two groups, and the aim of those two groups was to build something with Legos. For every construction that they would do, they would pay them a little bit of money. But the amount that they were willing to pay them would decrease as the amount of units increased. However, the way that they managed these two teams was a little bit different. They had one group that was called the meaningful group, I think, and another group that was called the specific condition group. And in the first case, they were telling the candidates, hey, every time you finish one of the constructions, we are going to pay you whatever amount. Once you're finished, we are going to destroy these figurines so the next person in the experiment can use the Legos to build something new. In the second case, in this specific condition, the moment they delivered this first piece and received the Legos for the second piece, their first piece was teared apart in front of them. This created a cycle of never really finishing. The second group lost passion. They weren't motivated to work for less money, and their interest for Legos didn't really matter anymore. In the first group, there was a correlation between the passion for Lego and this amount of time that someone would spend building. In the second case, this correlation didn't exist, which is why I was making once a video about why you should build MVPs first, because otherwise you ask people to build something and then that doesn't make any sense. And you've put a lot of effort and you've demotivated your team. And the thing about a demotivated team is that it is very hard, it is very difficult to motivate them, to lift them once they've already lost that motivation. And that's what most people miss. And what are you gonna do? Like, you already hired the best of the best and you burn these people out. What happens afterwards? Who do you hire? The hiring pool is just becoming smaller. If you think about this second group, they got demotivated doing Legos during an experiment. Like, Legos is so cool, at least for me. But I would also get demotivated if someone was tearing it apart in front of me. But now imagine those teams that are suffering this recurringly. And all of that because companies asking you to start vibing instead of thinking about what is it that you're building. So those PMs in the Reddit comments aren't being dramatic. They've seen this happen. I've also seen that happen. I've been in teams where it's a little bit hard to explain, but it requires so much work to get a team to be motivated again. Like, yes, it's possible, but when I had to do it, I basically needed to put myself on the line a lot. I needed to tell management, step back, like, stop. You're not getting close to the engineering team. If you want to build something, you go through me, and then I discuss with them whether we build it or not. Because they were so burned out, they didn't want to build anymore. But so would you if someone was asking you to change priorities all the time, wouldn't you? It's painful, you know? You're removing people's purpose in that moment. Like, you're making them hate their own work. Not everything about vibe coding is bad. There are 3 cases also in which I think vibe coding could be a good approach. Case number 1. When you're building a prototype, tool will define problem. You already know what the problem is. You just want to build something fast and test whether it works or not. It's almost like building an MVP and then just releasing it and seeing what happens. Whoosh! You just want to try something out to see whether it is what you thought or it's not. Number 2, when you have senior people making decisions. Senior people have already worked with product. They've already read all of those PRDs. They know how product thinks. They know how we think about edge cases. They know how we think about business metrics. In those cases, people can vibe code. It's because also they're not gonna ask for a full solution built on vibe coding. They're gonna think about the lines of code that they wanna vibe code. Like with this thing that Lovable offers, I saw their website before. The fact that they already have projects tells you people are not prompting all the time. They're just reusing products, which means that this is almost like in Envato, this marketplace, you're just doing a plug and play of headless solutions. Isn't that what the whole market is offering? The only thing is that perhaps the vibe coding helps with the integration. When I was once trying out Flutter, I don't know if you know this framework, it works with this coding language Dart. The only good thing it ever asked me is to refactor something, which I refactored, but then it wasn't explaining to me how to call it afterwards.
Hace días que te observo
it created so many bugs that I didn't understand where these bugs were coming from. You cannot imagine the headache I had. And I committed very often, but I had things working, and when I went to previous versions of my commits, it was just a disaster. I just lost my patience. I ended up not liking Flutter anymore. I thought, okay, this is horrible. Why did I put myself through this? Why was I even doing this? It was like a passion project, you know, and I ended up not liking it anymore. Third case, when failure is cheap. If you're building something like an internal solution, there's marketing teams who have someone who's slightly more technical. They need to scale the creation of some of their codes, of some of their creatives, and they don't want to rely on tech because that's something they don't necessarily need. In those cases, it doesn't matter if you use Vibe Code solutions. As long as you have someone quality proofing everything after it's done, you're fine. When it comes to something that could be a security breach, I wouldn't recommend it. You can use Vibe coding tools for things that aren't gonna tank the user journey by making a change. You can use Vibe coding to make an A/B test. There is a possibility of combining a little bit of both worlds. So you use a combination of traditional PMing and Vibe coding. First step, start with the problem definition. Don't start building immediately, because then you're gonna narrow your thinking so much that you're gonna anchor to that solution that you were first thinking about. When they start building one solution, they no longer think about whether that's the right approach. They're just thinking about what are the changes that they need to make to those solutions so that it works better or so that it drives the metric that they wanna change. Second step, explore the solution space. Now that you've already understood what is the problem that you wanna address, think about, hey, how is it that I wanna solve it? What are the options? Here you document your decisions. And once you have that, once you've made your plan for now, then later, and here I'm not talking about the roadmap, you are able to go into Vibe coding. Step number 4, build with context. The whole reason why we write PRDs or why we write tickets that are more complete is because you want people to understand what is it that you're solving for, what is it that you're understanding, what is it that you're assuming, and why it is that you want to approach it in a specific way, which is why you create documentation. With this approach, you get the speed benefits of Vibe coding whilst preserving the strategic approach of the traditional PMing. Are we optimizing towards short-term feature delivery, or are we optimizing towards product value? Vibe coding works when you're trying to impress investors with rapid feature delivery. But traditional PMing works better when you're thinking about building a sustainable product. It's about which approach fits your context, your team's experience level, and your definition of success. If you have an opinion, you can leave it in the comments. And if you want to watch more stuff like this, subscribe. Thanks a lot and have a great day.